That's a given.
Half of the problem was resolved with the lower machinery. And that's in the report. The half of the problem that is in the site with the tank is not resolved. And you said a number of times, the site is clean, the site is clean. The site is not clean. The lower machine room has been shown that it was adequately, that it was cleaned based on the guidelines, and they filled in multiple packed layers and multiple layers in there. They have not shown or indicated in any way that the site around the tank is clean. And that's our concern, that we have these wells, they're available to be monitored now. There's no reason not to monitor them now, to see what we're into. And the idea that we're going to actually basically surcharge the soil by using it as a retention, the adjacent land above the tank, understand we're no longer directly above the tank, but we're directly adjacent to it. We're going to surcharge that by using that as a retention basin. We need to evaluate those wells prior to that being used so that we don't basically distribute that oil in the process of using it for retention.
So addressing the second part of that first in terms of the retention. Being a surface basin, during demolition, the surface water is going to run off, go into the basin, be filtered through the basin, and then be released. So it's not promotion of infiltration that could possibly pick up that contamination that you're thinking of.
So you're lining it.
Well, it's not going to be lined. It's not going to be lined. I mean, that's the earthen portion of the site that we have, but we're not promoting infiltration through this. So we're going to use the existing subgrade that's there.
But you're going to achieve infiltration because it's soil and because you're not lining it.
Because it's not lined, we would get some secondary infiltration. That's true. What I want to point out, and thank you, Chris, for handing it to me, is as part of the action plan that was submitted under the Rizzo report. I'm reading page 4, section 2.4. Groundwater sampling and analysis is that LPP and dissolved petroleum were not detected in the groundwater samples collected from monitoring wells located outside and down gradient of the site building in March 1997, and LPP was not detected in the monitoring wells 1 through 4 on April 14, 1998. So there was sampling outside of the building, and Rizzo has it documented here that petroleum was not detected in those samples.
Okay, so
that's where the statement was coming from.
So what you're saying is we're not going to find anything in the wells. So what we're asking for is let's monitor those wells prior to the demolition, prior to building the retention pond above the tank, to show that that's still the case, that there isn't a situation where we have, well, you're telling us that there is no oil in the ground. Let's just prove that that's true.
Are you saying that we're going to put in this detention basin, and it's not going to be lined, and you're going to have water go in there, and it's not really going to be absorbed?
No, there's a difference between an infiltration basin and a retention basin, in terms of, the engineering vernacular I'm going to use. Infiltration, we want highly permeable soils. We want to promote the water to go through. In retention, it's going to hold back the water and release it over the surface, as opposed to more water going through infiltration into the ground. So
You said it wasn't going to be lined.
It's not going to be lined. And I agreed with him that if it's not lined, there would be water that could be absorbed into the soil. But it's not an infiltration basin. There is a distinct difference in terms of how we would design a site. And I don't mean to play games with the vocabulary at all, but it's not an infiltration basin. It is a retention basin. But it's an unlined
How
retention
is it not
basin.
going to be lined and retain the water?
So have you evaluated the soil that's there to show that that is not a permeable soil? It's a clay, or it's something that's going to minimize the intrusion, the absorption of the water.
We haven't done current testing, in this round for this temporary basin.
So we don't actually know that the soil that's there isn't a very permeable soil that's going to actually be an absorption condition.
Well, I know it's not a highly absorbing condition, as you indicated. We have the previous soil testing results from when all the wells were dug in the area. We have those. Could you hand me the boring report, and I'll just touch base
How
upon
long
it?
was that?
Well, it was when those wells went back in 97, 98.
97.
You don't have it with you. All right, I don't have it with me. I
No, but-
apologize.
No, but just, we're talking about whether this is going to function as a retention basin or whether it's going to retrain. And
Thank you. Yeah. Right, so these are some of the lower ones that Steve has handed me. I didn't have them in my file, I apologize. is that, there's medium sand and silts, medium sand and silt.
Sounds very permeable to me.
Well, the sand can be permeable, but depending on the level of the silt, the silt would expand and absorb and almost results in like a clay-like barrier. Yeah.
Okay.
That overflow.
I'm not, that's,
Direct connection to the line.
Do you have the boring logs?
I do not. They should be in that, everything we gave you.
Yeah, I've got so much here, I'm just trying to find. Boring logs for Rizzo 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Those are inside.
No, those are outside. 1, 2, 3, and 4 are outside in the parking lot. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Monitoring wells, okay.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are in the lower machinery room.
I agree with that, but I thought they were looking at soils inside the machine room.
No, but I'm saying.
And they're
the
looking for a
boring-
free-floating
The boring,
product.
right, the boring report tells you how hard it was to put the
Oh, I agree.
probe
Yeah,
down.
I agree, I agree.
That's what I'm trying to find in here.
Okay.
Continue.
While he's looking at, can I just ask a real simple question?
Sure, of course.
Why don't you want to test the water?
Well, I'll be completely honest with you, it's not a situation of not wanting to test the water. It's needing reassurance that we have a project here that will allow us to go through and remove the tanks, remove everything that we need to. We need to get to a certain comfort level that we have a project before we want to dig into the tanks, dig into having any oil within the tank removed, getting the tanks out of the ground.
But you have to remove, if there's oil down there, you've got to take them out, whether you've got a project or not. If you own the land, you're responsible to take them out.
That's
Right?
isn't it
that's
to your
correct.
advantage to know sooner than later what you're into? I mean, if,
We know there's oil there. Rizzo told you there's oil there. Rizzo told you there's oil there. The bottom of the monitoring wells is oil. He put them in, measured half-inch standing water, standing oil. What else do you need? You've got oil on that site, down the well, and it's going into the environment. Okay? That's not,
So can we get an agreement that you'll at least test the water so that we know what we're dealing with? It's like you're asking us to avert our eyes and, like, don't pay any attention to the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. I mean,
No.
it's there.
And I don't want to come off as, somebody who doesn't want to protect the environment. I mean, that's not what we're out to do. And we're also not asking you to, look over here so we can do something over here.
No,
It's,
and we're not suggesting that.
okay, I just
but
want to make it
even,
clear.
even the argument of doing it out of sequence, in terms of you're going to do it, but you're going to do it in a different sequence, what is the downside for you from doing the testing at this point? The wells exist, drawing some water off of them. We're not asking you to remove the tanks, we're just saying, we'd like to know what the conditions are. And what you just said before was that they showed that there was no oil in those wells. So what is the downside for you for not doing that testing at this time? Is it a, I mean, we talked about financial, kind of packaging deal, or is it not?
Well, it is. I need to know that we have not just a building permit, not a demo permit. And we need a mechanism that we can finance taking care of that site. And that's where it's at. The demo is a separate issue. The town's involved with their section, we have our section.
Sure.
What Craig is talking about with the wells, he's talking about a half-inch of oil. The reports close out the site with no further activity needed, no more remediation needed. That tells me that they were comfortable with what they found in those wells.
Right.
I don't know what that means, but that's the
At that
point.
time.
At that
Right,
time.
yeah.
Now, what we're talking about is taking that building down, leaving the foundation, then coming in and doing our site work. We're not interfering with those wells, we're not interfering with groundwater, we're not, nothing. This is the process that we need to take, and, the thing is, it is a function of the 139 from months ago with the town is why this is a separate application. We have to take these buildings down.
Right.
So that's why there's a push and pull with the separation. But,
But does knowing that the wells have oil or not, does that in any way affect that separation? And I understand the separation, and I understand the desire to do the demolition and the remediation or whatever that might be as part of the other part of the package. Does snowing now affect that in any way, or?
I don't see the need to test those wells until we're working with the ground, with actually doing the site work. In the, like I said, the first order of business is to take care of that, that parking lot area, obviously.
So our concern, well, my concern is the potential effect of putting the retention basin above this. So their aversion to not wanting to line it to minimize the intrusion of water. And therefore, I would call it surcharge the ground. Would you be willing to incorporate a lining of some kind in order to minimize
Yeah.
the intrusion? Because that way, we're
Yes.
basically taking the ground out of the play.
Sure.
We're saying that all of the absorption, that the retention pond is occurring, that'll be lined, so we're not superimposing that load on the soil? Does that solve your questions?
Maybe, but not necessarily, because I thought that the purpose of the detention was to take out some of the solids. And that requires some kind of movement of the water through the soil.
Well-
Now you're gonna, if you line it, how are you gonna get the contaminants out of the water?
This side of the basin, the downstream side, would be a filtration dam. So it would be, a stone-lined dam that the water would travel through horizontally. And it's in that area we would get that removed. That's why I'm saying anything that goes, down through the ground, through the open pores of the soil is not what we're planning on. We're planning on the horizontal movement of the water through here and then following the natural gradient down to
You
Central
catch it
Avenue.
on the downside, and then
Exactly.
the design for that, the design for this dam is engineered to filter out whatever kind of solid.
Correct. We're not talking about, fine particulates. We're talking about, solids that we can settle out, solids that we can remove out of the stormwater. So it's not to replace like a water quality treatment unit that you would put on a closed drainage stormwater system where, it handles microns. We're talking about large particulates that could be taken out of the water stream before it discharges into Central Avenue.
The detail of the dam is, it's held up by like 4-inch, 5-inch stone, so it's got some girth to it. That's covered with a Marafi fabric, which provides the filtration.
Yep.
And then covering the Marafi is 1.5 inch stone, small stone, which will catch that first round of the bigger particulates, and then the Marafi will get the smaller stuff.
Right. But
So as it filters out, it's clean rainwater.
And in terms of lining it, we have no issue with that. We could certainly line the bottom of it. If the concern is that there's any water going through into the soil, it could potentially pick up anything, whether it exists or not, we certainly line it.
understand our concern, or my concern on that.
Absolutely. I can absolutely understand the position. There's no question about that. I know where you're coming from. So we want to work with you on, solving those challenges.
What's the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about is the financing part of it? What's the cost of removing the tanks? What are we talking about? Is it 10,000, 100,000, or, I have no idea.
Tank of that size,
Yeah,
have
it's-
to price it out.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, but it's pricey, because you're going to have to open up the concrete and, remove anything that's inside it and remove the tanks. And it's got to be done by licensed professionals. So it's not, Joe salvage guy that can do it. It's somebody that's going to have to coordinate everything with DEP and remove it. And, the tanks come out, any liquids come out, and it all goes to hazardous sites.
But
I don't
that's
know.
a fact. That's gonna happen anyway.
That is true. That is absolutely true.
So, my real question is, what's the differential between doing it now versus doing it as part of your site development? I mean, I understand there's a cost factor and it's the price of money. I get it. But what are we talking about? Does anybody know?
Excuse me, John?
I'm just trying to figure out what the cost differential is. The tanks are going to have to come out, no matter what.
Right.
And they're going to have to come out according to protocol and clean whatever contamination is there. So it's X.
Right,
And you're going to have to borrow X to take it out.
right.
And if you borrow X as part of a 40B project, you've got basically a deal on the borrowing side of it. If you do it as part of the demolition, you don't. But you're asking us to try to kind of defer a potential problem, and we've got all kinds of contingencies. We don't know what we're weighing here. It's, you're asking us to take a risk that the water in the detention is not gonna recharge and it's not gonna force, the contamination, if it's there, towards the river. So you're asking us to take a risk, but we don't know what the cost factor is, what the differential is. I understand there's a difference in the borrowing cost between, demolition versus 40B financing. Can you give us an idea?
Well, the demolition is not a financing issue. The 40B is a financing issue. Everything we're doing here right now is out of pocket. So there's a difference. You can't get financing just to demo a building, John. I've never. This is all expense on us right now to move forward with that demolition. That's on us. And then when we, hopefully we get a permit for an apartment building, and we'll have financing, and there's always contingency money in construction. The first thing we're gonna do, like I said, is lift those tanks and see what we have. It's just the way it has to go that way for us. It's the way it has
Okay.
to be.
Can you?
I just want to make sure everybody knew that. I already knew that. But you understand we're weighing
I understand,
alternatives
yeah.
here, and we need to put it out on the table.
Yes. But again, we're not, we're getting these buildings down, we're not disturbing the foundation. We are, put in the line retention system that we're talking about. I think we're making a good effort here.
Now, when are you grinding up the concrete? Part of this job, part of the building demolition?
No.
Cycle?
The material the brick or the concrete that comes down with the building would crush that aggregate on site, but we're not gonna take out the foundation walls until we're doing site
So
work.
there's one of these 40-foot-long brushes that's gonna be moved onto the site? With the three different jaws for the three different sizes of...
Yeah, what we had talked about is crushing the material that we could leave on site down to 3 and 4 inch aggregate. We could get more specific for you on that, Craig. That's where it's at right now.
I'm concerned about, is that gonna be as the site work project or the demolition project?
The crushed stone would be, to crush the material would be a part, we'd like to have it as part of the demolition project.
So, refresh me, and I've got so many plans here. The demolition project comes under the town's bylaw, right?
Yes.
But the site work comes under 40B. So that's a different set of rules, right? So when they crush the building, we should be more concerned under the town's bylaw. It has to do with the environment. So we've got to take care of the noise and the dust. Okay? And I've heard nothing of that.
Well, in terms of the noise.
You people want to work 6 days a week. What, 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night? I think that's in your work schedule?
You have the work plan, and that work plan addresses, some of the dust concerns.
I think the neighborhood should know that 8 o'clock Saturday morning, you're going to hear this truck crusher go bum, 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 bum. It's going to seem like you're over at West Roxbury crushed stone.
Well,
It's not a quiet project.
Craig, I believe that the town, in the last Conservation Commission meeting, said they were gonna set up a community meeting that they wanted us to attend to talk about how this process is gonna go.
Right.
And so the immediate butters will know when they'll have notice that the building's gonna be coming down. And it's a big building, it's not an easy project because of the proximity to the tracks and Central Ave and Elliott Street. It's gonna be somewhat of an imposition on the neighborhood for the few days that it's coming down, or weeks or whatever, and the trucking out of the material and stuff. But that's what's there, right? You can do things to mitigate it, but it is a business district, it's a busy area, and there's gonna be noise.
Do you contemplate having the neighborhood meeting before or after we make a decision on the permit?
Well, I was waiting to see how the town, I haven't had communication with the town on the demo. We're supposed to coordinate this. I don't know where they're at with that. So when we get some coordination, I'll try to see where the town is at, sort of organizing a community meeting, see where, if they've hired a contractor yet, see if it's the same contractor that we have, we'll be able to coordinate the site a little bit better and maybe adjust these plans a little bit, depending on logistics, but, you know, there's some unknowns there still.
All right, we're gonna open up to any other commission questions, then the public. But I have to tell you, my concern is that I would like to know what the risk factor is. It's a separate issue from whether or not, you know, you have to do it as part of the demolition. The tank's coming out, and the ultimate issue is, do you take the tanks out as part of the demolition project or part of the construction project?
Right.
I get that, but to make that decision, I need to know what the risk is. And I don't see any other way, in terms of assessing the risk, is to just take a test from the monitoring wells that currently exist. I mean, there's no cost to it. And I'm guessing a little bit here, but you may be concerned that, oh gee, what if it comes up oil? You know, they're gonna say, you've gotta take them out now as opposed to later. I understand that that would be a concern because it has financial implications. But you're asking us to take the risk of not knowing what's there. And all you have to do is take a test of the water.
Yeah, but if we know the oil's at the bottom of the monitoring wells,
Well, we don't.
What-
It's been 17 years.
it doesn't go. It's in solid granite. That's as solid granite. These people say we're gonna drain all the water through solid granite.
I don't know what your.
That's the Rizzo boring report for the monitoring wells.
But is it the boring report when they dug the wells outside in the parking area? Or are
Yeah,
you talking about through the
right there.
floor? I don't know which one it is. There
I'll tell you right there.
16 of them.
No, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. You want a site plan for it? I'll dig up a site plan.
No, what I'm saying is that I can't tell if these boring logs are from inside.
No,
the
they're
lower
outside.
machine room. These are the outside.
Yes.
Okay.
You want, give me a couple minutes, I'll find you the site plan.
No, it's not a test. I mean, it's something that you're gonna have to respond to.
They're
But,
boring, they bored into, okay? They
Right.
went through the dirt on the top,
and they hit bedrock,
and they hit bedrock, and it said they hit bedrock.
right?
Had to switch to an air compressor
Okay.
to turn the bit, which means it's rock.
Okay.
And at the bottom,
I'm with you so far. Go ahead.
okay, at the bottom, when they got down there, they said, we have oil in the hole. Okay, where'd the oil come from?
This is in the parking lot. You agree with that?
Well, the wells that he's referencing, there are the 4 wells that are outside in the
Yeah.
parking lot. They had the report had that there was some oil on the tips, and I'm not disagreeing with him. But then again, we have that same report, the section that I just read to the commission, that said they didn't find anything in the soils around it. It's the same correlation between these boring reports that he has in his hand and the section that I read to you from the Rizzo report. So they found, you know, a little bit of the sheen on the oil tips, but then in their professional opinion, they said that there was no contamination outside.
Have you tested those wells?
No, I have not tested them.
It's
John.
not a cost factor. It doesn't cost anything to get out and take a sample.
You know, John, on the summary and conclusions on in the last statement there, it's clear what the LSP's opinion is. It states, given the results of the soil and groundwater samples described previously, no further activities are planned for the site. A permanent solution has been achieved for the release site as a result of the remedial activities. And our response action is RTN, you know, the case number is complete, and the Class A2 RAO has been achieved for the site. That includes the groundwater samples that Craig's referring to. This is a closed deal.
I agree it was
disagree.
closed back in 1998, but we've got 17 years of very high groundwater elevation. And we don't know what's there. All I'm asking you is, look. You're asking us not to look.
What I'm asking for, with this, I'm asking for a demolition permit to knock that building down. I'm not, and again, we're leaving anything that would have impact on that area. We're not impacting either the storage tanks or the monitoring wells. And what we're proposing is 4 feet above that, and we're gonna do a lined system. There's no reason for us not to move forward with this, in my opinion. I don't see any risk assessment at all
What
regarding.
did the Rizzo
regarding the-
report say about the building foundation? It says in the building, in there, page 28, It says the extent of oil contamination on the site is only contained by the building foundation. And you people are gonna take the building foundation out.
What
So
they-
where's the rest of
no,
that
what they-
oil
what-
going?
What they said was that you had the building foundation wall, and what they did is they excavated 4 feet down from the machine room floor, and they got to bedrock. And they also noted that there was no cracks or fissures in the bedrock, and they felt that it was contained. And like I said, they took all the material out, they replaced the material with gravel and dirt, plastic and concrete.
But that's inside the
yeah,
bathtub.
But that's
We're
in that.
talking about
yeah.
outside the bathtub.
No, outside, when you get outside the foundation, the one thing that we're talking about now is the monitoring wells that they drilled down in the lower parking lot where the underground storage tanks are. They also did a number of cores inside where the machine room was, where they found all kinds of them. And that's why they had to dig everything out. They found product. They had to take it out.
Right.
So, and again, what we're talking about is essentially to the west end of that unknown parcel. If you bring that out to Elliott Street, bring that right down towards Elliott Street, that's our foundation wall. The tanks are, I don't know, 50, 75 feet away from that. And that's where the monitoring wells are. We're not impacting it. We're not doing anything with that lower parking lot. But we are gonna be handling that lower parking lot with redevelopment, like I talked about earlier. So I just don't see there isn't a risk.
Any other questions from commissioners? Do we have questions or comments from abutters? Members of the general public? I'm shocked. I am. I am. Well, let me ask you, what do you think would happen if we said, as a condition of issuing the permit? I mean, I've got things that I've been writing down here that I'd like to see. But what do you think would happen if we said, we want you to test the 4 monitoring wells, and you appealed it to DEP? What do you think DEP would say about the fact that you've got 4 monitoring wells sitting there and you don't want to test it? It's a little bit of a hypothetical, but I'm just thinking, wouldn't they say the same thing?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of parts to the answer. The first one is they're going to look up the RTN, the same thing that we've propagated to the commission. They're going to say, oh, it's a closed case, the professionals have signed off, you're good to go. I mean, I think that's going to be their initial response once they dig up their records, because they're not going to be made aware of anything additional. And then I think if you were to push that further, I mean, continue to harp on it, then it just becomes a timing issue. Is you have whatever's below the pavement, whether we talk about the lower machine room concrete floor or below the asphalt. In this particular activity, we're not doing anything below this, so nothing gets disturbed. It's like, it's a cap, it's a closed site, you're leaving it alone, you're not touching it. And I think, quite frankly, they could agree with that. They could agree with, we're removing the superstructure above it and nothing below it, and as long as we line that basin, we're not introducing the potential for anything that's below there to move anywhere else, to leave the site, to go to the riverway and so forth. And I think that we could certainly substantiate that position with them.
Have you done any percolation tests on the soil?
No. No, we haven't.
Why not?
Well, frankly, because, the infiltration that we're doing, is limited infiltration during the site development plans. And before we can get, before we want to put machinery on the site, we want to get the building taken care of, and while the machinery is there, we dig exploratory test pits and, confirm the soil in those 2 isolated areas, one being over here and one being along the western property line, for the focal point drainage systems that we have to introduce.
Yeah, but your whole drainage system is contingent upon water being infiltrated into the site.
To a very limited.
Biometeration with your wood chips, where's that go? Going into the site.
The infiltration is a very small component of, the site that we're doing. It's really more of the treatment that we're getting going through the wood chips. And then we're getting some infiltration, but it's really the treatment through the media that we're seeking.
Michael, what do you think of the proposal? I'd be interested in knowing. Are you comfortable with this as you analyze it? Or?
Well, I understand John's concerns about signing off on something where you have an easy way to check and confirm.
I'm trying to find out why I shouldn't be asking you people to vote with me for an enforcement order to take the oil tanks out tomorrow.
Well, that's another tactic. That's a different tactic.
Okay?
The,
They're down there, and we know there's oil down there.
well, at this point, we don't.
Well,
We have
according-
differing reports and differing information.
According
and
to
that's-
Rizzo,
And I'm
the oil
of-
is there.
And I mean, I agree that we should, it's an easy thing to test the soil. The monitoring wells are there, we ought to include that. Because that would tell us where we are. And granted, I agree with what they're saying in terms of lining the retention basin and not going into the soil. We're basically taking the building down to grade. And I think that taking the building down is a good first step. It's been a long time coming, and I think that what they're proposing in terms of taking the building down to that level, without going into the soil and dealing with the foundations and removing the tanks, I think that that can be achieved reasonably. At the same time, I would agree that testing the monitoring wells is such an easy step. There's no reason not to do it. And it gives us a better understanding of what we're into on the longer term.
Yep. We've asked them before. It's not
But
the first time.
that's my opinion. And I think that what you're proposing in terms of taking it down to the ground and the idea that we're not going into the ground, I think that that's a great step. The wells are there, we ought to just take the short step and do a test.
But I think you'd agree with that, we could demolish the existing structure without, interference or action with anything that's below grade. So whatever's. go ahead.
The exception to that is the vibration. There is going to be vibration. The vibration is going to cause shifting of materials, could cause, changes in the flow of water through the site. That's something we don't know about. And I personally don't have a lot of experience in the impact of vibration and demolition. But the more we can do to minimize the intrusion of new water into the site, I think and lining the retention basin is going to be a good step. But since the wells are there, it's a no-brainer to me to test them. And I still don't understand, knowing or not knowing, how does that affect knowing now, because you know now, does that mean that you're not allowed to include the removal of the tanks during the site development phase? I'm not, if you can show me that, then that's an argument, and I think that's where John was going, but,
I think if they find out that there's oil down there, DEP may force them to take it out tomorrow. Take out the tanks
well,
tomorrow.
is that a concern? Is that your fear, or?
Is that we would have to take the.
That
tanks out
DEP
tomorrow.
would force you to redo the removal, and then that would shift the whole thing to being, dollars in hand versus dollar financed.
Well, I think there is a timing issue on it. I'm not sure of the time frame. I don't know if it's immediate. I've heard different standards on it, but it would box us in as far as the time frame. I'm unsure.
Because DEP would come back and tell you that you need to do it in a certain frame of time.
I think that's the way it works, yeah.
Just to your point about the vibrations and so forth, and I'm not going to pass myself off as an expert either in terms of demolition and vibrations. And I certainly don't want to bring in, the other application that, we can't speak about, which is the removal of the building on the town's land.
Sure.
But I think that, that the same theory may hold true if you extrapolate it to them, and that their request to remove a building is now suddenly contingent upon any activity on our land. You know what I'm saying, is that you've kind of now, if you want to apply that theory to it, then you have to apply it to their site as well.
As I said, I think that what you're proposing and the idea of taking the building down now is a good idea. And it's been a long time coming, and we should take the building down. I'm not saying, from my perspective, I'm not saying that we need to remove the tanks at this time, but it's an easy step to do the testing of the monitor wells. It's very, very easy. It's a negligible cost. Why wouldn't we do it? And from that, my recommendation would be that we would require that to be done, just so that we know what we're into.
trying to get off the tail end here, in the overall scheme of things, would it be better for having an independent LSP employed to assist us with this?
I don't know I mean, we all have to decide on that.
Right.
I mean, if
That's why I
they,
brought it up.
if they had, okay, that's a different
It's
conversation.
the same way we, have our vernal pool consultant, we can have an LSP consultant.
Yeah, we certainly can.
I think the first step is to say whether the monitoring needs to occur. And then once you've decided that the monitoring needs to occur, then we can determine whether or not the information that they would provide directly, or whether we would need it from a third source. But
Right.
do you,
See, I think what I haven't been able to persuade you of is that the mere fact that you test it doesn't mean, let's say it comes up that it's dirty. That doesn't necessarily translate into, you've got to take them out now. But it's part of the risk assessment that I think we're obligated to conduct. I mean, that's part of our mandate, to look for alternatives and to assess the risk to the environment. And I think it's a basic fact that we need to know. But that doesn't prejudge the issue that you're worried about, and that is it going to come out of your pocket or can you borrow it?
You know, if you extrapolate that out, and we went out and tested that and it came back dirty, then what?
Then Craig might be right, then we might need a consultant to assist us in assessing that risk. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable if they came in and said that there were, 10 parts per million as opposed to 351 parts per million. It wouldn't have a whole lot of significance to me. I mean, if it were, 1 part per billion, that's probably, in the air that we breathe right now. But I think it might get into an area where Craig might be right, that we need a consultant of some kind to give us advice on that issue.
Those reports, I believe the groundwater is about 8 or 9 feet below the level of the groundwater is 8 or 9 feet below the parking lot. I don't.
Is it? I thought it was pretty high, because when they cut through the machine room floor, I thought that was a problem.
And that's down.
That's down.
The machine room floor is lower than the level of the parking lot.
Okay.
So by several feet.
I know that it's in the report there. I thought that the water table in that lower parking lot was over 8 feet. And I don't see how we're gonna disturb groundwater 8 feet when we're taking down above-ground building. I don't see it.
I don't know, but I'm still concerned with, you putting I don't know how many gallons would be, you'd expect to be in that detention or retention pond.
Well, again, the misting that you do, a lot, as when we had the demo contractor here at the last meeting, a lot of that misting gets absorbed into the material that's gonna be shipped off-site anyway. It's not like there's gonna be a swale full of water, and, we're not talking about a river.
Well, I know one of the things that the DEP comments on is whether or not you've done your calculations, and I know DPW is concerned with your stormwater calculations, and that's what they've asked us to make
That's
sure we
what- that's what
coordinate
they're
with
gonna
them.
work. Right.
We don't have any idea how much water is gonna go in there, because it's not just rainwater, it's the water used during the demolition process that's used to, keep the dust down and dampen the debris. What the runoff calculations are, I have no idea.
Yeah, and, to that end, in terms of the sizing of this, we've done the preliminary sizing of this, but in meeting with DPW, they want to work with us in terms of either whether this needs to be bigger or the controls need to be different and so forth, and we'll work with them on that. And that's why they want to implement the application of the stormwater management permit to the project, so we can do those controls, so we can look at the capacity, we can look at, how that functions in their eyes as well. So that was the purpose of their email to the commission today.
There was some question earlier about the depth of the groundwater. Okay? There were some questions earlier about the depth of the groundwater.
Below the parking lot?
Yeah,
Well, it was raised, but go ahead.
I'll tell you, it's right here, 8.45 feet, down.
8.5 feet, yeah.
8.45 in well number 4. Well number 3,
8.67.
8.67.
And then number 2 was 8.36.
So it's right there.
1 was 9.24. So I think Stephen indicated that it's about 8.5 feet below the asphalt. So
Right.
the reports support that. Yeah. But then, again, the lower machine room, the asphalt is here, the lower machine room is here. So your reference to the high groundwater being below the lower machine room is because this is already several feet below
Right,
the
right,
exterior asphalt. I think that's all we were getting at. I don't think we were contentious about those numbers.
All right. But in terms of coordinating with DPW,
Yeah.
and just putting the DEP comments aside, just DPW, one of my concerns is if we try to do something tonight, we don't know what their contingencies will be. So if we were to issue a permit, conditioned upon their approval, it might change, because they might come back and say, well, we want that retention pond to be 2 feet deep, or 3 feet deep, or 4 feet deep. We don't know, and that's why I think we do need to know what's below it, because if they say, we don't want a lining, because we think the absorption process would be a better, cleaning technique, we don't know what's gonna happen if we don't know what's beneath it. And it could come up clean, and then everybody would be happy.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to speculate as to what DPW will say and so forth. I think just gauging the initial reaction from us meeting with them today, I don't think that's an avenue they were going to chase out, which is, how deep it is, or whether there'd be reaction to it being lined or so forth,
Can you ballpark what you expect that to hold?
I couldn't, not off the top of my head, no.
But 225,000 gallons.
How much?
225,000 gallons.
What was that?
225,000 gallons?
No, that would be amazing. No, it's not that big.
I have no idea.
It's only 3 feet
Yeah, we'll
high,
go
right?
with that.
It's
We'll
o-
go with that.
Yeah, it's only a few
Close,
feet.
close
It's
enough.
just enough to capture, surface runoff and give it a place to collect, settle, over, and filter through. It's not huge. And that's, part of the discussion with Joe and John today was, maybe we want to store a little bit more water and then put a riser pipe in there so it actually, fills up and actually goes through a riser pipe and then goes out to the street, actually the municipal drainage system, as opposed to surface flow, which is the way we've shown it here. That's really more of the coordination items that we're going to be dealing with them.
All right. I'm going to tell you what my concerns are, and then we can add or subtract from them. I'd like to see a soil test so that we know the absorption capacity in the area where the detention is. I'd like you to find out where the discharge pipes go to. And I understand that, it's a little confusing, but I'd like to pin that down as to where they are. I'd like you to test the the monitoring wells. And obviously, I think you already know this, our approval is going to be contingent upon the DPW approval of the stormwater permit. I'd like to make it contingent upon your responding to the DEP comments that are here on their website. They're probably, coexistent with DPW.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman, but if I could, as part of the ZBA application process, Horsley Witten had raised the same comments, so we provided a point-by-point response to that letter, which would already be in the record, if that would satisfy your concerns.
It might, it may depend upon the date. I'm looking at the start date of this. This is on the DEP website. It says start date of 7/1/2014, end date 11/14/2014. So it's just printed today. I can't tell, it looks like 8/14/2014, these comments. I can't remember when the Horsley Witten report was completed.
Yeah, it was
September 30th.
September 30th, yes.
Okay.
So,
All right.
so
Then
that was.
that may respond. to
It
what-
does, and, we can certainly provide those comments, to the commission, or they could be obtained through the ZBA record, whatever is more convenient for the commission, we're happy to do. But
We've given the letter.
you may already have the letter.
Yeah, we do have
You
the
already
letter,
have it,
right.
okay. So what I would ask is, I think that their letter, and then our response to their letter will satisfy your comment regarding whatever DEP wrote, because that was their initial first pass. Well, that's what I was gonna get to, yeah.
All right. And number 6 for me would be the water calculations. I don't know what else to call it. How big do you think that detention basin's going to be?
Okay. And I would suggest in that case, because that's also going to be related with DPW, as I mentioned.
Yes, it
Going to
will.
work with them as to how it's going to drain. So that calculation may also, you may consider combining that with your contingency to the DPW satisfaction.
Yes, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And then just as another point, in terms of the soil absorption that you referenced as comment 1, you know, if we agreed to line it as, I think it's Mike had pointed out, I think the soil absorption rate would be moot at that point.
Right, I was wondering the same thing. Is if they're gonna line it.
I'm looking for contingency plans, if
Okay.
there's some kind of a 100-year storm that comes along and we get a lot of excess water, and it goes over the berm, I
You wanna know what you're.
yeah, just, I'm
That's
just
what that
protecting the
overflow
downside.
pipe would be for. It wouldn't go over the berm, it would go into, drop into that pipe that we were talking about with DPW to go into the system.
Right, but it would be without being cleaned.
Into the Pine Tree Brook.
Right, and that's why, and this all ties back to, we want to know where this is going. If it's going into the sanitary sewer system, it's one thing. If it's going right into Pine Tree Brook, that's something else. And I know you have to do that anyway.
That's correct. We're committed to do that with DPW. We've already started engaging some folks that could help us that the town's approved of, so that's on our docket.
Right, do you want to, those are 6 points, some of them clearly can be joined. Do you want to add or subtract anything?
No, I agree with you, Joe.
Right?
The monitoring well testing, I didn't know if you included.
I did,
Okay.
test the monitoring wells. Included anything? Arthur?
I would like to see a dissertation of the difference between the standards of 1997 and 2014
In terms of contamination.
Contamination?
in usage. Okay? Because these people, the applicant is pinning its decisions based upon an industrial usage of the site. Now, if this goes to an apartment usage, I don't have the qualifications. That's why I think we might need an LSP to tell us before we get down too far down the road, are these people on the right path or are they in the wrong path? Okay?
True, but
We can't do anything. You can't make a decision about the demolition until you find out whether you're using the proper standard. If the standards have changed, and I've been told by LSPs that it's changed 3 times,
sure.
okay? And have someone tell me across the table, well, according to 1997, it's clean. But we've had 3 changes since then.
Understanding that,
And I'm asking, can he provide an analysis of DEP's changes?
relative to the testing that was done and whether or not it still would
The
satisfy.
testing and the usage category.
I agree with you, but I'm not sure it's applicable to the demolition project.
That's my
as
point.
opposed to the development project.
I think
saw
you're-
it the same way.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is applicable and needs to be evaluated, but if they're proposing a strategy that minimizes any impact to the subsurface conditions, they're not removing the foundation, they're trying not to remove the tank, they're protecting the ground from intrusion of any of the water due to the demolition, all of those things are minimizing the impact on the subsurface conditions.
Just tear the building down.
And that's what we're talking about. All we're talking about is the demolition of the superstructure.
But in the end, we're going down 10 feet?
But that's a different discussion. That's a discussion
Right.
during site development.
Right.
And we're not talking about that at this point.
That's when we changed the regulation, our guidelines from town to DEP.
Right, but if I could interject, sir, I mean, that's actually, in this case, that's probably a good thing, because, you know, the removal of the tanks, well, no, for everybody, in that the removal of the tanks, the removal of any hazardous material goes through DEP as opposed to the commission. I mean, you guys will be copied on all correspondence, but the standards that we'd have to adhere to are through them, and that's not gonna change. Whether this is a 40B or any other project, it's still through them. You know, so as Mike pointed out, that's on the site-related portion of the notice of intent that's been filed. And DEP would review anything that we have to do
And that would need to happen at current standards.
at current standards.
And the same applies when they remove the lower machine room basement foundation. If there's contamination outside of that, they didn't believe at the time that there was, if they thought it was contained within the foundation, if contamination is found outside of that, based on current standards, that would also have to be cleaned. But that's not in the discussion at this point.
With those, so you've got your list of things, can you, maybe you can delay that response, but is there any change? I know there have been changes to the regs, but on the use limitation? I don't know that they have been, do you?
Yeah, I don't know that there have been. I'd be remiss to comment without checking it further.
All right, would you check that for us?
We can, sure.
All right. Do you agree to a continuance of this? I mean, we've got a list of things that we'd like you to do, but you have to assent to the continuance.
I'd like to get,
You don't have to assent.
I'd like to get at least an approval with an order of conditions to get our demo permit. I'd like to close this out. Would like to close this out tonight.
Okay, we can take a vote on it, but I'm,
Are you-
my
That's
view
a
is.
long list of things that are
He
contingent.
wants us-
It's gonna have to come back to show that those are
No,
concluded.
he wants a vote tonight, we'll give him a vote.
We have a deadline.
Okay. Everybody ready for a vote?
We have a deadline of the 30th with the town that we're trying to adhere to of this month, so,
The 30th of,
November.
but they're nowhere near there. I mean,
I
they
understand
continued
that.
their hearing tonight.
Well, they don't even have a full notice of intent in here. For 6 months, they've had an abbreviated one. I don't know what's going on with the town. I haven't seen anything from the town, so.
Well,
But
I
that's-
agree with you,
it's
but it,
impeding us, it's impeding us on performing on what we're supposed to do. You know, so I mean, there's one thing that I give a little thought to is about the monitoring. That piece. But, I mean, it sounds to me like we have to work with DPW and satisfy your concerns with the drainage issues, and seems like we're there. Why can't we get, yeah. Okay. Okay.
do you have a position on
Well,
the continuance?
what we'll do is I'd like to talk to Phil for a few minutes about what we've just discussed here before.
Sure.
Before we make a decision on it. We'll step outside.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure, the next hearing's gonna be a long one, so.
Well, we have our,
2-minute break, so we
2-minute break.
keep the order on the next applicant.
How about,
Fair enough.
can I ask for a bathroom break?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
they'll give us,
All right, thanks, we'll be in recess for a
thank you.
couple of minutes.
Sure. Thank you for agreeing to the break. You know, we consulted with it outside, and you identified 6 points on there, 6 potential conditions. And what we would ask is, we would like to have the commission, vote on the hearing. 5 of the conditions are acceptable to us. The one about the testing of the wells, we would request that that be made a condition of the site notice of intent, and not the demolition notice of intent.
All right, the problem that we've got is that at this juncture, we don't have, I mean, I know you've agreed to it, but until we actually receive the data, put the testing of the monitoring wells aside, but soil test, finding the discharge points in the river, working with DPW, the water calculations as to how much that detention pond is gonna hold, we don't have that. So without that, we'd have to deny the permit, but we don't want to deny the permit. But we'd have to cite those as reasons why. We have insufficient information, which would justify a denial. And that gives you an appeal, but that wouldn't help you, because DEP's gonna say, well, we want that information too.
Okay. Well, then, I mean, based on that, then, we would continue the hearing.
We'll continue
Would continue it.
Do you agree to continue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
But.
Can you get that information? And I understand you don't want to do the monitoring, but putting that aside again, can you get the information by the 9th or sufficiently in advance of the 9th so we can deal with it?
What's sufficiently in advance of the 9th? Just for
Kathy,
confirmation.
what's
When would
our-
you need it by, so we can make sure we have it?
5 days, 7 days? What's our,
Right.
Do you have a scheduled meeting with them? They
Well, we
It's
need
all
by the
go ahead
25th of
with-
November.
DPW.
We don't have a scheduled, we don't have a scheduled meeting with them yet. Again, this is all new information today as to how we were going to approach everything. We have to coordinate that search and destroy mission on where the pipes are and so forth before we can figure anything else out.
Tonight.
So,
Okay.
That's good. This is it. Well, we need it by a week from tonight,
Thanksgiving?
just because, we're having it the 9th, this was delayed a week, and
The challenge with that one, Mr. Chairman, is by having it by the 25th, by a week from tonight, is coordination of that camera work. That's going to
Oh,
take a
I'm
little bit of
sorry.
time.
actually it will be December 2nd.
That helps.
No, I'll go for, that's for news, I'm sorry, that was for the newspaper, for anything to go into the newspaper.
We would certainly do our best to meet those objectives to get it to you. But as I did just mention, because we have to coordinate that camera work with the DPW, it's going to be work within the street, police details, the whole 9 yards. There's some logistics there that we have to sort out. So
I understand.
we will do best efforts to get it done and have the answers for that.
All right, good.
Yes, sir.
Well, with your assent, then we'll continue the demo proposal until December 9th.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is 131 Elliott Street Site Development.
Should I introduce myself?
Yes.
Stephen Connolly, applicant.
And Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates as site engineers. Yeah.
Yeah,
You want us all again? Peter Freeman in the law
Thank
group?
thank you.
Chris McCarthy with Allen Major.
Thank you. So now what do you want to tell us about the site development?
What do you want to get into now?
Now you're going to take the tanks out, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough to kind of put a presentation together on the site, because I know we really haven't discussed it to date. Direction from the commission as to, what we'd like to discuss relative to the site application. Stormwater management features, removal of storage tanks, the contaminated soil, quote-unquote contaminated soil. That's all part and parcel to this site intent application.
All right. My quick response is something I said before, and, we're interested in preserving those interests that we protect. One of them is open space, and again, I'd encourage you to go back to the good faith bargaining table with the town, because my view is you can't give us that which you don't have for open space. If this belongs to the town, you're not giving us, you're taking this open space away from us here. And this is particularly important to us because that's where the tree came down, and that's a big deal for us. And that's the source of the enforcement order. So I'd really like to see, if you own the entire project. I mean, the whole plot. If you owned it, you could give us some open space that we need. And to be honest with you, I'd rather have you take the building and put it back here, closer to the tracks, and give us the open space that we currently have right now. That's just me, Todd. That's not an official position. But I don't know how you can do it, unless you can work out some kind of a plan with the town. Because you're not making the site better, you're making it worse for us. And when I say for us, from the environmental protection perspective. But-
Sorry.
All right, so, and that's, I think I said that before in one of our prior meetings, and I don't speak for the other commissioners, and perhaps I'd like to weigh in before you even respond to that.
Okay, yes, sir.
Anything, Judith?
No, we feel the same way, and we've discussed this several times, that this is the area, you know, as John pointed out, this whole area is vibrant. This had protection from the black oak, you know, that you took down. And we'd like to see this area continue to be open and useful for people. And it would be a benefit to the building as well. So in terms of habitat for people as well as for, you know, all the interests that we protect. So it's odd that you don't see that as clearly as so many people seem to see it. That this is the area on the street, you know, the plaza area, to keep as open space, to protect for the air quality as well as for plantings. This is the perfect place to put it.
Anything, Mike?
Yeah, I had two things. First thing was, the enforcement order is against the removal of the tree. And during that, we talked about replanting a large caliber tree.
Okay.
And based on this plan, based on filling out the entire site as a parking area, I don't see you accommodating that. I don't see how you're going to accommodate planting a large-scale caliper tree. So that, I think, is a big issue for me. The second thing is that the stormwater controls, the system that you're using, I don't think is adequate capacity given the size of the site and the amount of impervious area that we're talking about. So more, you know, a better understanding of how that system is going to work, and that there is some, you know, there's going to need to be retention capacity to minimize storm surge. I don't see that in what you proposed. But I believe that that's something that we can develop as the project goes along, based on scaling. The tree issue is a bigger issue because that has a direct impact on the layout of the building and the amount of site that you're basically taking up using constructed assemblies.
I'm nothing to add, except, you know, where would you propose to put a large caliber tree?
With this plan, I agree with Mike that on-site, there's not a space to accommodate a large caliper tree like you'd be looking for. I'd be looking at suggestions off-site to plant a large caliper tree. I think you had mentioned at the Board of Appeals, John,
Thank you.
maybe the library site where the tree was removed.
And that's
That's
something
a
that
good
other
public
people have
space.
done, and we've requested it, and they've complied with that. You're not limited to the space, but
That's actually has a